talking about is sort of an overview, very brief, as brief as I can be, about the contamination of the drinking water situation at Camp Lejeune in the past, and also go over the work that we've done over the last, say, 20 years. And after the meeting, we'll be available to answer questions, both the contamination of the drinking water and also the health studies. So, to start off, there were three, base open at 42, there were three water systems. Two of them hadn't at point served the main side of the base. Terra Terrace water system served that housing area of Terra Terrace. In 1972, the Holcomb Boulevard system came online and served the housing in that area, like Midway Park and so on. So the drinking water was contaminated by several sources. The Terra Terrace water system was contaminated by an off-site dry cleaner. The main side Hadnot Point system was contaminated by a lot of different sources, including a landfill and spills in the industrial area of the base, and so and other problems with spills and accidents. So there were several sources of contamination at main side. And in 1980, they started to sample the drinking water. And they started to detect something wrong in the water. They couldn't identify exactly what. But by 1982, they were able to identify at Terra Terrace high levels of a chemical called tetrachloroethylene, or PCE, perchloroethylene, used in dry cleaning. So that came from the off-site dry cleaner. And over at main side at the Hadnot Point treatment plant and the water system served by that treatment plant, they found very high levels of trichloroethylene, TCE, which is used in degreasing in industry. And it was used, I guess, for the same purpose at Camp Lejeune. Now, when these two chemicals are in the drinking water and in the groundwater itself, because that's where it came from, they degrade into other chemicals as well. So they degrade into a key chemical called vinyl chloride, which is a very potent carcinogen. So not only did you have trichloroethylene and perchloroethylene, trichloroethylene a known carcinogen, perchloroethylene a probable carcinogen, human carcinogen, but you also had vinyl chloride, a known human carcinogen as well. And then there was benzene as well in the main side Hadnot Point system, which is a known carcinogen. So you had several carcinogens in the water. So, so that was the situation. The contamination continued from certainly the 1950s all the way through to 85. In late 84, some of the contaminated wells were shut down. In February 1985, the more heavily contaminated wells serving main side were also shut down. So that after that, the contamination pretty much was moderate, except there was a reading later in 1985 of a high reading of benzene, which there was some question as to whether that's a reliable reading. So by the end of 1985, let's say, the contamination was minor after that. And in Terra Terrace, we modeled the water system, and I'll talk about that in a second, and estimated that there was some residual contamination up until the time the system was shut down itself in 1987. So that's the contamination situation at the base, and we can talk about that later if you have some questions. In 2006, what we call the Community Assistance Panel was formed. Actually, this was mandated by a scientific advisory panel the year before. That panel was created and mandated by Congress because of work done by Jerry and others, working with their senators and congressmen. So this panel first wanted us to have some kind of mechanism for community participation. So that was the CAP. And the second thing that panel wanted us to do was we were looking at birth defects and childhood cancers and birth weight and so on in our earlier studies, but we hadn't looked at adult diseases yet. And so this panel said, do a mortality study, look at deaths in this population, and look at cancer incidence in this population. So back in 2005, they asked ASTDR to look into doing those kinds of studies and exploring whether they could be done. So the CAP has been meeting since 2006, and the purpose of the CAP is, as you can see there, not only to improve communication between us and the community that was exposed, but also to involve that community in our work, to advise us on how to do our work, to provide us with valuable information that we couldn't get from the Marine Corps that they knew, such as where barracks were, units were barracked on base, such as how people might have been exposed on base the various ways, not just from drinking the water and their residence, but in training and all various scenarios there. So the CAP has been vital in our research work. Without them, I don't know if we could have done the work we did.
So ASTDR is an agency of the federal government that was created by Congress to address community health concerns associated with hazardous waste sites, hazardous material spills, and hazardous material exposures. So it's our job by Congress to look at hazardous waste sites. We're investigating hundreds of hazardous waste sites across the country as we speak, in every state of the union except for one. And Camp Lejeune is one of the longest sites we've been involved with, but that's just one of many. And so we're charged with working with the community to address the community health concerns and then use that information to the benefit of the affected communities. In this case, what that information does, it informs programs at the VA and it supports the VA activities. So while we don't deal with medical care, we don't deal with compensation, we want to make sure that we use our information to the greatest benefit to the affected communities yourselves.
Move on to a couple of things that have been more recent. The first one is an assessment of what we call the assessment of the evidence for particular diseases and the drinking water contaminants at base. And this was, the VA asked us to do this because at that point in time, a couple of years ago, they were talking about looking into doing presumption for service-related disability compensation. And they weren't sure what diseases that might be on that list. Initially, they were talking about kidney cancer, but they weren't sure about other diseases. So we did this for them. We went through, looked at some 19 diseases, looked at all the evidence in the scientific literature, and came up with this assessment, which is on our website, which guided the VA to some extent in their determination as to what diseases to include in the presumptive list. So that's available, and we've also recently published a public health assessment which looked at the drinking water information, all the modeling we had done, and tried to figure out what the risk of diseases from that, using information we get from animal data as well as human data, and coming up with some risk estimates. And there, the findings were that yes, the drinking water contamination could have increased your risk of particular cancers like kidney cancer and liver cancer, and some of the leukemias, and also could have caused heart defects in children, serious heart defects in children, and some of the immune system disorders as well. That was based on animal data, although leukemia and some of the other diseases related to leukemia, like non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, are caused to some extent by immune issues. So that's part of that. Finally, and Rick Gillig here next to me is going to talk about it, we have two things in progress, two efforts in progress. One is soil vapor intrusion at the base, and Rick will talk about that. And the second one is the cancer incidence study that I'm working on. Look, again, we're trying to get all the state cancer registries involved in the country, as well as the VA registry. We have most of them already on board. We have a few left to get on board, and we'll look at cancer incidence this time, and also update our mortality studies. So that's in progress as well. So that's all I have to say. Do you want to?
Sure. So good morning. My name is Rick Gillig. I want to pick up where Frank left off about the soil vapor intrusion project. We've been working on this project for the last 6 years. Much of the work in the early part of the project was gathering environmental sampling results from across Camp Lejeune. We amassed over 40,000 documents that had information from various sampling efforts conducted across the base. We took that information, the environmental sampling results, and put it into a large database. We have over 5 million lines of data. We will use that information in our analysis to assess whether buildings, and there are over 14,000 buildings across Camp Lejeune. We will assess whether those buildings are located over areas of groundwater contamination, and we're looking primarily at shallow groundwater. The contamination in shallow groundwater will work up through the soil, and if you have a building over that contamination, it can work its way into the building if there are cracks in the foundation, other ways of getting into the building. So we have, because this is such a complex effort, we put together a detailed work plan that we will follow in doing our analysis. That work plan is currently going through the clearance process. An earlier draft of that work plan was shared with the CAP. We sent it out to peer reviewers, which are national experts on soil vapor intrusion. We received their comments. They had a lot of good comments on how to fine-tune the work plan, and we've done that. And we're currently in the process of analyzing some of the data, and we can do that analysis before we finalize that work plan. So again, we're in the data analysis phase. We hope to get the document out for public comment in 2020. Again, there's a lot of data to analyze. It will take time to do that analysis. And as Frank mentioned, we'll be available after this session is over if you have questions. I've got some fact sheets on soil vapor intrusion, and we'll try to answer your questions. Thank you.
Sorry about that. Thank you very much. So is there another announcement we'd like to make?
Lorraine, would you like to talk about the claims review that's going on?
Sure. I said it earlier, but I wanted to let you know that VA has several employees from its VA regional office, its VHA, the Veterans Healthcare Administration, from the Family Services group that are over in the room that's adjacent to this room, straight down the hall. And those are claims examiners who can help you with statuses of your claims, to look at your healthcare eligibility information, or try to help you with any other questions you have about your claims. We answered some questions last night, but we have a full staff, a full complement of staff over to assist you today. They will be here until 1 o'clock. We actually have the room till 2, so we'll stay until we see everybody that needs to be served today. So during the break, or at any time during this section today, you'd like to go and find out more information about a pending claim you have, how to file a claim for benefits, how to find out more information about the healthcare eligibility, or what you might be entitled to, please go into the room. They're waiting to serve you now.
So we're going to open up for question and answer, but we want to make sure that you appreciate the complex landscape here. So the work we've done at ASTDR has identified health issues associated with the contamination at Camp Lejeune. That information, including our review-informed programs at the VA, the medical Janie Anspeaker Act identifies a certain number of conditions for which you're eligible for medical care. Since that time, the VA has announced a service-related compensation program that identifies a set of conditions that you by definition are service-related, that you're allowed now to get compensation for disabilities associated with those. So there's issues associated with the health care, with compensation, and there's issues associated with the studies that we've done at ASTDR. And we'd like to now open the floor for some question and answer. We'll take question and answer for a bit, and then we'll take a break. We can come back again for some more question and answer.